Good morning, Sub2ers. Welcome to Goat Talk. Goat Talk is our weekly Facebook Live that we do. We usually have a guest on, but today you're stuck with me. We're going to take some Q&A and talk about some of the most commonly asked questions in Sub2 and Creative Finance. If you're on Facebook, make sure that you go to well, that's not the right one, is it? I need my producer in here. That's not the right one. I don't know where my doohickey is. You need to go to what is it? StreamYard.com/Facebook and let them know who you are, so they'll show us your comments and your name. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe, and that's the right link for that. So we'll get all this stuff straightened out here pretty soon, I guess. Still a little bit early for me. So if you guys are here, let us know who you are and where you're located so we can say hey to you. Hey, Vincent, good to see you. Good morning. This has been sent from California. Good to see you today. Jay, good morning. Good to see you. Hey, Phil, good to see you. Another California person out there. So we're glad to see you guys here today. Today's topic, like I said, is just frequently asked questions. Of course, if you have questions, let us have those in the comments. We would love to answer those for you here while we're live. So Marcia's in here. Good to see you, Marcia. Farouk, good to see you. Rosie from Kansas City. And somebody on Facebook from Texas. We don't know who you are. Remember, Facebook's pretty nosy. They want to know your profile and all that stuff before they let you actually show your comment on StreamYard. So anyway, we'll get kicked off. Like I said, if you guys have questions, just drop those in the comments. Hey, Sarah, good to see you. Johnny from Texas, good to see you in here. Justin, hello, good to see you too. So hope you guys are doing well, talking to some sellers and buying some houses. So let's get going. David's here from Houston. Good to see you, David. Okay, so let's get started. We may have some guests in here this morning. Some of the Sub2 Max coaching students, they get the link so they can come in and ask questions on camera or offer their commentary. So we'll get kicked off here. These are, until we get some questions, these are just some of the most common questions we get in email and Messenger and in the groups just day after day. And, you know, I've been doing this for 22 years. I've heard a lot of these questions before. I'm sure if you're new, you have a whole bunch of questions. So maybe this will help you and answer some of those that you may be having right now. Number one, how do you properly insure a land trust? And how do you insure a Sub2 deal in general? That has got to be one of the biggest questions that we get. How to insure a land trust? Well, let me tell you, first of all, you don't have to use a trust. If you don't understand trust and you just don't know how you would use them, and there may even be some states when it's more beneficial to use an LLC or something different. I know Louisiana doesn't recognize trust, if I understand correctly, with case law. I don't know. We don't own any property in Louisiana. But it may be one. I know John Burley has told me several times that Arizona doesn't like trust. At least that's his opinion on it, so he doesn't use them there. But to insure a trust properly, the main thing to remember is that the owner of record is your primary loss payee. And you need to speak to your insurance agent, whoever does your insurance on your property. And while we're talking about insurance, let me just say, if you guys are investors, and you probably are since you're in here, whether you're a rehabber, you're a landlord, whether you do sub-twos or buy for cash, however you do that, you need to talk to Jason and Corey with Big Insurance. Those guys are out of Birmingham, Alabama. They're fantastic. They insure in pretty much every state in the United States, and they've got some excellent programs for you that will insure your properties probably less expensively than what you're paying right now. Especially, they don't have vacant property exclusions like a lot of companies. I use State Farm faithfully for years and years, but most insurance companies, if your property's vacant for more than 30 years, they will not cover any loss. And Jason and Corey don't have that exclusion, so you might want to give those guys a call. Anyway, so in most cases, you're going to have the trust and the trustee, or the trustee named as your primary loss payee. And that's how you're going to do that with a trust. As far as how to properly insure a sub-2 deal in general, that depends on how you take title. If you take title in an LLC, then you're going to do it the same way that you would normally do it. But as far as the trust goes, it's going to be the trust and the trustee, or simply the trustee, depending on how your insurance company wants to do it. Hey, Tristan, good to see you on here this morning. Tristan's one of our Max students. Justin's in Baton Rouge. Okay, good one. Morning from Los Angeles. Corey, good morning, everybody. Good to see you. Hey, we got a couple of people in here. Looks like Phil's in here. Phil, if you'll turn your camera on, we'll bring you on screen. Vincent asks, how do you hold your properties using trust LOC? I'm not even sure what a trust LOC is, Vincent. You're going to have to give me a little bit more information on that. Hey, Albert, good to see you here this morning. So you guys, if you have questions, Vincent, just give me a little bit more to work with on your trust LOC question. Good morning, Maria from upstate South Carolina. Good to see you. Okay, so our next question is, can you buy a house subject to if the seller's in bankruptcy? Well, understand this, guys. When someone files bankruptcy, they are giving up all of their say over their assets, their home, their bank account, their cars, everything. They're handing all of the authority to sell, to do anything with those possessions. They're giving that up to the bankruptcy trustee. So while they're actively in bankruptcy, no, you can't buy it. What you can do is actually petition, go to the bankruptcy trustee, whatever you want to call it, and ask them to release the asset. If the seller has little to no equity, chances are they will release that to be sold or to have something done with it, because there's nothing to satisfy creditors. Now, if there's a ton of equity, and when we used to do boot camps, we actually, my kids went to school with the Mid-Georgia bankruptcy trustees kids. And so she would come and speak at the boot camp and talk about what bankruptcy trustees actually look for. And she said, unless there were 50,000 or more in perceived equity. And she said, remember, we understand what actual equity is as opposed to real equity. We understand cost to sell and maintenance and upkeep and potential for vandalism and things like that. So unless there's at least 50,000 that we know we will get out of the sale of this property, we don't really care. Okay, so if you've got someone with little to no equity and they want to sell their property, if you can have that asset released from the bankruptcy, and it can be done, it's just as simple as a letter to the trustee. Maybe they'll do it, maybe they won't. It'll cost you 50 cents to find out. But you can actually buy that property. So just because someone's in bankruptcy doesn't mean that you can't get it. Hope that answers that question. Good morning, Rissa. Good to see you in here. Are you back in Arkansas, or are you still out in Oklahoma? Vincent said, I meant to say using a trust LLC. If what you're talking about is having your property titled in a trust with the LLC as the beneficial interest, then there's not going to be any difference in how you do it. The trust is still going to be the named insured. on that insurance policy. Okay, your LLC will just be the beneficial interest, and that's all going to be private inside your trust document. Nobody's going to know about that. Hey, Mark, good to see you. Where are you at today? Mary, good to see you. And Rissa's in Galveston this week. All right, so hope you're having a good time down there. Okay, if you guys have questions, give them to us in the comments, and we'll be glad to answer. So the next on our list of most frequently asked questions is, can you buy a property subject to that is listed on the MLS? Well, absolutely you can. We've bought a ton of them over the years that were listed on the MLS. And I'll tell you, my favorite, it's actually one of my top ways to find property is actually look for what I call soon to expire MLS listings. When I got started investing, one of the lists people talked about was expired listings, and that's still a good list to do. But I also, I thought, well, gosh, there are a lot of people out there that list a property for sale with an agent purely because they think that's the only way that you can sell something. They think if you have a house to sell, you call an agent takes care of it. And some of those people probably have some pressing issues that maybe the agent doesn't know about, because in my experience, most real estate agents, not all, there are a bunch of good real estate agents, okay, but the majority of them, they come, they tell you they can get whatever it is you're wanting for your property. They put a sign in the yard, they wait for somebody else to bring a buyer. And so they don't ask a lot of questions about, maybe like an investor would. And one of our key questions is, why are you selling the house? What makes you want to sell such a great house? But anyway, so some of these people probably have some underlying issues. Maybe they're in foreclosure. Maybe they're getting a divorce. There may be some reason that they really need to sell. So I started looking for specific sellers in the MLS and with certain criteria, and that let me know that the potential for a problem was pretty high. One was that the listing had been in there for over 90 days. So that told me that they had listed it, they hadn't got a buyer. If they have trouble, they're probably getting pretty anxious. I also looked for vacant properties in the MLS. Now that meant someone had already moved out. They had either been transferred or they had split up or whatever the case may be, but somebody was making a payment on a house that wasn't occupied, or even better yet, they weren't making that payment because they couldn't pay for two places. I looked for listings that had notes that indicated seller motivation. A lot of times agents will put notes in the listing with something like bring all offers, must sell, seller motivated, as is, anything that indicated there might be a little bit of distress. And then looking for something that had a price reduction. So if I could find something that met all four of those criteria, I knew chances were that I had a deal. And we just mail off postcards to those and just say, hey, I noticed your house has been listed for a while, hasn't sold. We're looking for a house to buy in the area. We can close within 48 hours. Give us a call if your contract expires, or you decide you just want to hear what we do. And in a lot of cases, those people will call you up because they really need to sell. So, when we got them on the phone, we would ask them if they were still listed. And if they were, we would say, well, listen, we can't actually, if there wasn't enough equity, we would say we can't buy from you as long as you're listed. So call us back when your contract expires. And, we didn't encourage them to cancel their contract or anything like that, but we just let them know that we were available and an option. If they really needed to sell, sometimes they would cancel their contract and call us back. But sometimes they didn't, and that was okay. If there were enough equity, then we could pay the agent, and that would work out well for everybody. But in general, other than doing that, what you're going to need to buy a property that's listed on the MLS is an agent that understands what investors do, and that can be a little bit tough to find. Marcia asked, what are your thoughts on properties in probate? I've started marketing to that segment so far. Some callbacks and one accusation for being a bottom feeder. I have never, ever, Marcia, in 22 years marketed to probate leads. And listen, I've been called a lot of things in investing. I've been called, trying to take advantage of people and do this and do that. And that's okay. you know, you get used to it. Man, if you cold call, you got to get used to taking some abuse. But dealing with people that have just had a recent loss, someone that they cared for that has passed away, that they're never going to see it. I just didn't want to add that element of difficulty to the situation. That would probably get to me. And you're not the first person that I've heard say this. Of course, now I know a lot of investors who are very successful with probate. And I guess part of it is your approach, and you know, people are going through a hard time, and you just, you know, they're very emotional in a lot of cases. You know, I'm sure some people would be great. It would be great to have your help dealing with things. And you know, I might deal with probate, but I think I would probably do it a little bit differently. I might look for situations where the house involved, the real estate owned, had little to no equity and things like that, where it would be a case where they weren't going to be able to sell it and make a lot of money or something like that. I would probably refine it just a little bit before I approached it. My take on it is it's just not something I'm very comfortable with doing, but that's just me. You know, certainly, like I said, there are plenty of investors that make a lot of money with probate, so there is money to be made there, but it's just not something that I would feel very comfortable in doing. So that's just me. I appreciate the question, though, and good luck with that. So our next question is, what do you tell a seller who asks, if you take over my payments, what happens if you die? Okay, and I'll tell you this, I think that's one thing that I do with sellers. A lot of, especially I guess newer investors, might be afraid to be just so totally open and honest with people, you know. But I'll say things, I guess, that might be considered shocking to some people. Instead of trying to dance, what I've learned over the years is, instead of trying to dance around issues, questions, hard questions, maybe it's just to, you know, just feel, you know, act like you're talking with a friend. And if somebody said, well, what would happen if you died? Well, my response would be, well, man, it would really suck to die, but you know, in seriousness, we've got things in place. We have a substitute trustee, and that's one reason that you know, we have a trust that buys properties so we can set up properly for estate. So we have someone else that would step in and take over the day-to-day management, handling everything for you, just to make sure that there are no problems. That's why we don't take title in corporations or LLCs or personally. And that's my response to that. We have successor trustees that come in and handle the trust, so you don't have to worry about anything. But that's my response. But I will come out with something like that, and it really kind of disarms people when you're so open, and you'd say something like that, because a lot of people, especially new investors, will be like, oh, well, you know, in case of something like that, we would do this or we would do that. Listen, I'm just pretty open and upfront with them about it. Yeah, it would suck to die, but you know, we do have some things in place that would take care of all of that for you. So let's see. Looks like Justin asked a question. How do you market to properties in probate, Marcia? How do you get the contacts? So he's got a question. Hey, Kevin. Kevin said, good morning. Good to see you. You're out there riding around with the goat this morning. Glad to have you. Justin, I send out letters and mail them. I don't call them. Yeah, that would probably be my approach as well. If I did probate, I probably wouldn't call. How do you know what properties are in probate? Justin, you can buy a list of properties in probate. There's several services that sell them. I don't recommend doing that. What I do know about probate is that a lot of these services are you know, you don't know how current the leads are. And I know some probate cases may go way into the future, especially with COVID. They were really backed up because of the court system and everything. But if you want to get the most current leads, the most up-to-date ones, you're going to need to probably go to the courthouse and do that. So, hey, Jeff. Morning, sunshine. Good to see you too. If you guys are working on credit repair, or you have buyers and you operate under our model of getting your buyers ready to go with credit repair and working with a mortgage broker, you guys want to reach out to Jeff and Jackie. They have a credit repair service, and they're good people. So you guys talk to them. Jeff says, I agree with not calling probate when I know they're in probate or a recent death. Yeah, that probably wouldn't be something that you'd want to do. At least not for me. I wouldn't be comfortable with it at all. Tristan, sometimes people ask what happens if I walk away from making payments, desert the agreement when I buy Sub2. I imagine your response to that is the same as the question, what happens if you die? Well, actually, that question's a little bit different for me now, Tristan. I've been doing this for 22 years, so I'm able to say, listen, we've been doing this for 22 years, and we've never, ever left someone on the hook for the payments, especially if I'm giving that seller a down payment, if I'm having to put some money in the property for repairs or whatever the case may be. I said, listen, I'm not going to walk away from this investment. That's just not what we do. So, when people have a question like that, it's usually because they're concerned, about the what ifs, and there's just a little bit of uncertainty, and you just got to make sure they understand that this is, they have recourse too. That's why we provide a recourse document that tells them what steps to take. And so you'd want to reassure them that way too. Listen, if I fail to make the payments, you have recourse here. You can get your property back in better shape than it was before, with principal pay down, with less owed on the mortgage. So you're going to be in good shape either way. So yeah, a little bit different. Neil asked, what is the best way to handle insurance that's escrowed? Just get a completely separate policy so as to not cause any issues with the escrow and the lender. No, Neil, that is not the best way, okay, for a couple of reasons. Some people do that because they're afraid of the due on sale clause, and it's true. There are two things that are probably going to trip you up with a due on sale issue more likely than anything else. One is obvious, and it's all on you, and that's making the payments on time. If you make the payments on that house on time, in my experience, you're not going to have an issue. Number two is insurance, because think about this, Neil. When you buy a house subject to, yes, a deed is transferred, it's recorded at the courthouse, but there's no notification that goes out to the lender on that, okay? So that's not an issue. But what will be sent to the lender that will change things is a new insurance declaration page, because the minute you buy that property, let's say you buy it from Joe Smith probably, if he's like most people, he has the house in his name. That's 99.9% of the houses you're going to buy. They're going to be in the homeowner's name, and they're going to have their policy with, State Farm or whoever, and the policy name is going to be Joe Smith as the primary loss payee. But the minute that you take the deed on that property, that insurance is invalid. The owner is no longer Joe Smith. And if there's a claim, the obligation of the insurance company is to try to deny it. So they're going to be looking for a reason to do that. So you've got to have insurance ready to go the minute you take the deed in the name of the entity, trust, LLC, whatever you're taking title in. So what you should do is contact Corey and Jason and have your insurance policy already set up, ready to go, effective at your closing time, in the name of your trust or LLC or however you're doing it. Now, cancel the old policy, let the new one come in place of the escrowed policy. Chances are you're not going to have an issue. Now, one of the keys to this is naming your seller as an additional insured. In other words, the mortgage company gets this new declaration page and they see Joe Smith's not the primary loss payee anymore. What's up with this? What is this Neil trust? And they're looking at the declaration page and they get down to the additional insureds and they go, oh, well, here's Joe Smith. He probably placed his property in a trust, okay? And, the Neil, whatever, Neil's managing it for him, whatever the case may be. So Joe's still on the policy. We're cool with that. It's all good. That's the best way to do it, okay? And we've never had an issue. I've heard of other investors who have, but I suspect there were some other things going on there too. So that is the best way to do it, Neil. It's not to get a new policy. It's just to substitute a new one that's done correctly in place of the old one. So I hope that helps. Okay, let's see. Neil, where can I find the recourse doc? You're in Sub2 Max. It is in the guide with all of the forms that you need to buy subject to. It's in there. Seller recourse document. If you have any trouble, let me know. We'll tag you and get you in there with that. Okay, Vincent had a question. How does it work when you buy a property subject to at today's market price, for example, $500,000? Whew, that's scary, isn't it? And let's say in 3 years, it's only worth $300,000. What happens in that situation? That's a great question, Vincent. It's actually on the list of questions that we get today with the market being so hot. Here's the situation. When my student comes to me with a property, evaluate this potential deal, one of the first questions I'm going to ask, if they don't tell me, is what will this thing rent for? Okay. If they say this property's got a monthly payment of $1,500 PITI, I'm going to ask, what does it rent for? Okay. Well, it rents for $2,100. Okay. The payment's 15, it rents for 21. Great. What does that mean? If I buy that $500,000 house, I'm probably going to sell it for $540 to $550 with seller financing. In a typical situation with a $500,000, first of all, I don't buy a $500,000 house. That's pretty pricey for me. But if I did, I'd buy a $500,000 house. Let's say my seller owes $480. There's no equity at all, and the house doesn't need anything. It's move-in ready. So I take the house, I mark it up to $540, and I sell it with $40,000 down. Okay. I collect that $40,000 down payment. I finance my buyer at $500,000. I owe $480. Okay. I'm going to set their payments right around what market rent would be. And let's say that allows for a cash flow of $500 a month. If the market tanks in 3 years, that house is only worth $300, but they still owe me $490. A couple of things may happen. Chances are their payment's not going to change, and market rent is about what their payment is. Would they be better off to abandon their home and move away? Probably not. They're going to have to rent a place anyway. They're probably going to stay. If you were around in 2007, 2008, 2009, there were many what they call strategic foreclosures. In other words, somebody looked up their house was worth a lot less than it had been before, so they just gave the keys to the bank and walked away. Well, unless they had a reason for doing that, that was pretty stupid, because if they could afford to live there, it's their home, they've made it their home, why not just stay and wait and see what happens? You can give the house up anytime. Chances are pretty good the people in our houses are going to stay. For the ones that hand the keys back, no, I can't sell this $300,000 house for what I owe for it, because remember, I still owe about $470, $480 on it. But what I can do is rent it out and wait. And that's what I would do. That's why the rent rates are so important when you buy a house. What are the numbers? Make sure the numbers won't just work with a seller finance situation. Make sure they would work as a rental or an Airbnb or whatever it is that you want to do. Is rental my first choice? No, it's definitely a distant plan B, but it could work in that sort of situation. So I hope that made a lot of sense to you. Tristan said, so, okay, if I hadn't been working for 22 years, it's the seller recourse document that protects the interest of the seller and that they're entitled to retrieve the property. Is that correct? I believe that's the recourse if we're in default on payments. Yes, that's correct. You would just want to try to reassure the seller that, listen, this is a business for us. It's not a hobby. We're giving you $10,000. We expect to protect that investment. We're going to do everything that we can to make sure that things are taken care of. In the event the worst were to happen and everything just fell apart, we have this document here that explains exactly what you would need to do and what the process is, and we would give you the house back. So again, just being sincere, answering their question honestly, not trying to dance around it. oh, well, no, that'll just absolutely never happen. It couldn't happen in a million years and that sort of thing. Just be really honest with people and really sincere. I think they pick up on that. Neil said, I was meaning getting a new policy to cover my outside of the escrow. That way they don't see it. That's just not necessary, Neil. Don't be afraid. The only issue that it could ever bring up would be due on sale. Don't be afraid of that. It's not going to be a problem. If you're absolutely, or anybody's absolutely terrified of the due on sale, they don't want them to know about it, yes, you can get a separate policy. And I've seen people argue about this, about whether it's legal, whether it's loan fraud in some way. Remember, most of the time, a charge of fraud comes from intent. What was your intent when you did this? And I'm going to tell you, if you've got a seller's policy in escrow that you know is not valid when you buy the house, and you go out and you take out a policy in your name or your trust name or your LLC name or whatever the case may be, and your intent is to only file on that policy if there's ever an issue, I don't think that's going to present a problem for you. So yes, if that's what you would prefer to do, you can get a policy outside of escrow and pay for two. It's a waste of money. I don't think it's necessary, but you can do it if you want to. And I don't think fraud is going to be an issue. And that's not just my opinion. That's also the opinion of insurance experts that I've asked over, because when I first heard about it, maybe considered fraud, I asked those questions too. And I don't think that's the case. Justin, when pitching this to someone, what is the elevator pitch or short explanation? When I say subject to, no one knows what I'm talking about. And that's why we don't say subject to, Justin. Our sellers never hear the word subject to. What they're going to hear me say after I've talked with them and heard all about their house and their 3 bedrooms and 2 baths and their accent walls and their wallpaper in the bathroom and their perfect this and perfect that, but they really need to sell it because they've been transferred and they have to leave in 2 weeks. I'm going to say, wow, that sounds like a great house. Bob, you owe $250 and the house is only worth $260. There's not much equity to work with there. We obviously can't pay cash, but tell you what, we may have something that'll work. What if I could make the payments for you until I could find a buyer? Is that something you would be open to? I'm never going to say subject to, but I am going to put it that way. And because sellers don't know what subject to is. Don't use a lot of technical language, a lot of industry insider sort of terms. They don't know what it is. So if there's an elevator pitch, I guess that's it. Listen to the story, make sure it applies. Know the answer to the question before you ask it. I talked to Bob, and I know his situation. I know what he owes. I know he's got to get out of town. I know that me taking over the payments will work for him. That's just the way that I put it, and that seems to work out.
Confused mind says no.
Confused mind says no. That's absolutely right. So that's some input from our producer. Okay. Vincent, I'm starting to learn about traveling nurses and short-term rentals for them. Do you have any experience with this? I don't, Vincent, because I'm telling you, Airbnb wasn't a thing when I was a transaction engineer. We didn't even know what those were. I did everything in the beginning. The first 12 years, I did Section 8 rentals. I did lease options. I did straight rentals. I did seller financing, the whole bit. But for the last 11 years, for me, it's only been buy subject to, sell with seller finance. So no, I don't have any experience with that. I do know that we've been doing corporate rentals for the last 6 months, fully furnished, utilities paid, some great places. We try to stay an extra week in the one we're in, and a traveling nurse is actually kicking us out at the end of the month. So we're not going to get to stay that extra week here, but yeah, I don't have any experience with that. I know a lot of investors who do though, and the short-term rentals, make a lot of money for them. So my only experience with them staying in them, but I think they're great personally. Nolan, my market is Eugene, Oregon. I'm brand new at investing. having trouble finding clear information on how to sell with seller financing while staying compliant with Dodd-Frank? How do I include a mortgage officer in my transactions? Is that all that's needed for compliance? I read a post about owner finance transactions being limited to less than 3 per year in Oregon, even with a mortgage loan officer. Is that accurate? Clarity would be greatly appreciated. Nolan, that we did, Bill Walston and I did a whole podcast on Dodd-Frank. And if you will go to YouTube, Sub2 Deals is our channel, and look that up, man, it'll tell you all about Dodd-Frank that you would ever want to know. I think that was almost a 2-hour podcast. Go give that thing a listen, because Dodd-Frank is some pretty detailed legislation. I'll tell you this, just in a nutshell from that podcast, Dodd-Frank is something that you want to make sure you're Dodd-Frank compliant, or say, I'm not worried about Dodd-Frank compliance. We do a lot of the things Dodd-Frank asks for, but we're not 100% compliant, and that's okay, in our opinion, anyway. So it's not something I don't think to worry about. As far as being in Eugene, Oregon, Ed Zulovic is a Max student who's in Eugene. And listen, we're going to actually meet with Ed for dinner next week. We need to get you involved in that. So private message me and let's do that. Any other investors in the Eugene, Salem, Oregon area, we're going to be down there. I think it's next Friday night or for lunch. I can't remember. I've got to look at the calendar. So make sure that you get, I'll have Ed reach out to you, and we'll try to get together. We can talk about Dodd-Frank at lunch or dinner or whenever we do that. So, yeah, good to see you. Okay. All right. We got Phil on here. Hey, Phil, how are you?
I'm well, sir. How are you?
Oh, man, we're doing great. Phil's one of our superstar Max students. He and Tracy, they buy a bunch of houses in Alabama. He lives out in California, but found out California was too expensive. So now he buys across the country where they're affordable. So what's up, man?
Nada, just coming in. I wanted to give a little plug for the coaching group and the in-person meeting that you've got coming up in January, because I'm really excited for it. Got my hotel and flights booked, so I'm really excited. One of the things that you guys do is you provide so much value, but you never really push the idea of the coaching program down anybody's throat, and that's really appreciated by some. But as somebody who has benefited from all that you and Jody do, I wanted to come on here and give a little plug for the coaching group and the live in-person meetings.
Well, thanks, Phil. We appreciate that. Listen, we pretty much let people find our group and do word of mouth stuff. We don't do some heavy marketing on it. What Phil's talking about are our masterminds. We started in-person masterminds this year. 3 times a year, we're going to get together for 3 days and talk about business and what works and what doesn't. And that's for all of our Sub2 Max students, no cost other than getting there. We'll probably even feed them while they're there. So we're looking forward to getting together with everybody and having a good time, man. We appreciate you jumping in on here this morning.
No problem. And if I could just add one more thing, when I heard you guys talking about insurance a little bit before, and Jason and Corey with their big insurance are amazing. It's super easy to do. They have an online portal where you can just go in there and register your insurance. It takes all of about 5 minutes. In fact, I was running the numbers on a house this week and wanted to know what the insurance would be after we purchased it. So I was able to pop into the portal, put all the information in there, and get a quote that I know is 100% accurate, because it's what it would cost for them to do the policy. So there was no getting on the phone and talking to an agent or anything like that. I could just do everything on the portal, and it gave me my monthly cost, so I could plug that in when making my calculations.
Yeah, that portal is pretty amazing. And the cool thing about it is you can go in there and set if I know I'm closing on the 20th with Joe Smith, I can go ahead and set that up to start my insurance at midnight that night. And, then I don't have to worry about being insured when I get the deed that next day. I don't have to think about it anymore. So that's pretty cool. And I'll tell you, you know, if I had to throw some numbers at it, I'd probably say 90% of our students who have gone to Jason and Corey have found that they're much more inexpensive than the insurance that they're paying right now. So yeah, really, and good guys to boot. So that's always great when you're dealing with good people. So appreciate that. Yeah, big insurance. That's what Cindy's on here. She says big insurance group is awesome. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, appreciate you, Phil. Stay out of trouble. Stay off the phone while you're driving. All right, man. Appreciate you coming in today.
Thanks, William. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day. Okay. Let's see. When is the next time the goat is coming to California? Vincent, we're going to be in California. Gosh, probably we're uncertain right now. We're supposed to leave Oregon around the 3rd or the 4th of January, but it may be a week after that. But sometime toward the middle of January, we're going to travel down the coast of California. So we want to meet as many people and students as we can on the way. So we'll let you guys know the dates. Not sure where exactly you're located, but we're definitely going to be in California around for probably a week or so around the middle of January. So we're looking forward to that. So if you guys are in California, let us know. All right. If you got questions, let us have them. We'll answer them. We got some more questions on the list here. I see Sheila is actually in the green room. Sheila, if you'll turn your camera on, we'll bring you on in here next. Next question. I have a couple of Sub2 questions. My first question is, what contracts are needed to get a Sub2 deal under contract and to protect myself? As far as getting the deal under contract, all you need is any standard real estate contract. And the truth of the matter is, you could probably write it on a yellow pad if you wanted to, but unless you have very good memory of what you should have in there, you probably want a contract. Now, people get really wound up about what contract they need to use. Well, I've got this contract. Yes, I have my own that I use that has had clauses added and taken away over 22 years. And most courses or educational products that you'll buy will have the writer's contract that they prefer and like to use. But the truth is, if you don't have one, just get any realtor contract. It'll do. Cross out what's not applicable, add things and special stipulations, or add an addendum. And really, you can turn any contract into a Sub2 contract with one clause, and basically that just says, you know, this property is being bought subject to the existing loan with Bank of America, loan number, blah, 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 loan balance X with payments of X. And that's basically it. You're spelling out the fact that you're buying this property subject to for X amount of money. So what contracts you need, any contract will work. You just need to make sure that you've got something in there that addresses the fact that you're just taking over payments on some financing. My second question, if I were to assign my contract to another investor, do I need, well, let me back up. And this person said, and what other documents I need to protect myself. There is a list of documents that you should, in my opinion, you should have when you buy subject to. Several disclosures, limited specific power of attorney, bill of sale, several. And that's going to vary with who teaches this to you. The truth of the matter is, you can get a deed and buy a house. So one document is what you absolutely have to have. At a minimum, for me, it would be the deed and the limited and specific power of attorney, because that's going to give you the right to act in place of the seller at any time where someone may question why you would be able to get information, whether that's from a lender or canceling their insurance policy when you get your new one, or whatever the case may be. But like I said, there are probably 8 or 10 that you really should have. Disclosures are a big key, and I'm talking about multiple disclosures, because you don't want somebody coming back later saying they didn't understand the transaction, they didn't really know what you were doing or anything like that. So you want to make sure that you've got that stuff covered. But again, it differs. It depends on who you talk to about it. The second question was, if I were to assign my contract to another investor, do I need to have all the contracts in place or just purchase contract with the subject to part included? Well, I don't like subject to assignments. I know that was a big deal. I don't know, 10 years ago, I think there was a course called AMPS or something like that, where and they sort of treated subject twos like lease option assignments. But I'll tell you this, if I get a subject to under contract and I assign it to Phil, okay, I'm assigning not only the property, I'm assigning my promise. Okay, I promised Joe Smith that I would make his payments faithfully until the loan was paid off, refinanced, sold, whatever. And then if I assign that promise to Phil and something happens, Phil gets a divorce, starts drinking, he gets on drugs, he goes nuts, whatever, then and fails to pay, you can be pretty sure if Joe decides to sue somebody, my name's going to be in that lawsuit because he made the promise to me. I don't like subject to assignments. Here's what I suggest instead of an assignment. If you get one under contract and you want to flip it, you decide you don't want to keep it for whatever reason, go introduce the new investor to the seller and say, you know what, Phil's going to buy this property instead of me. Make that introduction. Let them work it out. You know, the seller may not like Phil and say, no, I'm not going to do this. But that's the only way I would handle it. Personally, if it were a good enough deal to get under contract, I wouldn't want to assign it anyway. I'm going to want to keep it. But if I were going to assign it, that's the only way that I would do it. I would not assign a contract and then let Phil show up to close with Joe. And Joe's like, who is this guy that I'm letting take over my loan? I don't know him. I don't have any rapport. I don't like him. I don't like the car he drives or his haircut or whatever the case may be. I wouldn't do it. I just wouldn't do it. I think liability purposes, even though your name's not on it, you may have them sign this and that saying it's okay. I just don't like it. I don't think it's a good thing. So let's see. Vincent said, what about if you're not a mastermind student? Can you still go pay a fee? Sorry, Vincent. This is just for our guys. Okay. It's just a benefit for the max students. 3 times a year, they get to meet us in person and spend 3 days just talking about real estate, any questions they've got, deal structuring, what's working, what's not. We all get together and talk about our businesses. So sorry, we'd love to have you in the Max program, and you can get more information on that, and we'll show a link to that here in just a little bit and show you guys. If you want to join, we'd love to have you. So let's see, that covered that. Any questions you guys have? We've got a few minutes left. We're still going down our list of most. Oh, this is the question that Vincent asked earlier about the market crash. What would you do? Next question. What happens if you buy a property subject to and the seller files bankruptcy later? Well, remember, we talked a little bit about bankruptcy earlier, but what happens if you get the deed and 6 months later your seller files bankruptcy, or a year later, whatever the case may be? And that's happened to us a few times. And in my experience, you'll get a phone call from the bankruptcy attorney. They'll ask you what's going on, what happened. You explain the transaction. They go, oh, okay. They exclude it from the bankruptcy, and you never hear from them again. Now, what can happen if your seller files bankruptcy within a short period of time? Remember, the trustee has the right to look back at all the transactions, and I've heard differing periods of time. I think the shortest one the longest one I've heard was about 3 years. They can look back on any of the transactions, and what they're looking for are fraudulent transactions. In other words, the seller said, you know what, I'm going to file bankruptcy. Let me take some stuff out of my name before I do it so the bankruptcy court can't seize it and sell it. So that's really what they're looking for. Now, can the trustee unwind your transaction if there were a ton of equity or something like that? Sure, they can. And that's why one of the questions that we ask distressed sellers is if they've considered bankruptcy. Okay. And they may not always be honest with you, or their plans may change, but at least if they're planning on it, you'll know about it up front and you can take a look at things. Now, in a no equity deal, will that probably matter to you? No, probably not. If there's significant equity, there might. So just know that the bankruptcy trustee can come back and undo a deal if they feel like it was done fraudulently. So do your business properly. You shouldn't have anything to worry about there. Let's see. Sam, good morning. Checking in, looking as smooth as you. Listen, Sam, you know I just take a page from your book always. So try to be as cool as Sam is. I'll never do it, but I try. Okay. Next question. This is another really, really common question. In fact, just got this question last night again from one of our students. So if I buy a house subject to from a seller that has a VA loan, won't that keep them from being able to use their VA eligibility again until the loan that I'm paying on is paid off? And we hear that, gosh, all the time. I'm talking to a VA seller, but they're concerned they won't be able to buy another house using their VA loan. And that's just not the case. The limitation for VA financing is not on number of loans. In fact, someone with VA eligibility can have 2, 3 loans. Doesn't matter. What matters is the amount of their allowance, how much they're allowed to finance. In most states right now, that number is about 545,000 and some change. And it varies county to county. In most areas of the country, it's over 500,000 right now. In some parts of California, it's over 800,000. So if you've got Joe in Birmingham, Alabama, with a house with a $200,000 mortgage balance who wants to give you the deed, but is concerned that he won't be able to buy a new house in North Carolina when he transfers, if the price range of the homes that he's looking for there is in the 300,000 range or even 350 range, and you've got a mortgage balance on this house in Birmingham of 200, guess what? He's still got enough room to go and buy that new house. So yes, he can get a new loan. It's not a problem. So he can absolutely do it. Okay. You guys, you got any other questions? We would love to take those today. Somebody had asked about the link. You can go to sub2dealscoach.com. You can also go to sub2max.com. I think we've got that URL set up for you now. You can learn all about the Sub2 Max program and how it works, and get signed up and join us at that mastermind that we're having the 21st, 22nd, 23rd in Arizona, where we're going to meet with all of our students. So let's see, we've got another question here. You always recommend using a land trust to hold property. Why do you think they're so great? Well, there's a lot of reasons that I think land trusts are great. In fact, it would be so many reasons that what we did was we put together actually a little ebook on that. And if you want to go to sub2deals.com /50 reasons, you can get that. 50 reasons land trusts are terrific. Okay, you explain a little bit more to you about them, how they work, and you can get that. It won't cost you anything but the time to go over there and sign up for it. So I would love for you to go have that. Can I have the link for the insurance quotes, please? Gosh, what, I think it's man, I can't remember. I'll tell you what I'll do though. I will post, Vincent, I will actually post their link. I don't want to get it wrong. I'll post the link to their website. Corey, Jason, if you guys are on here, let us have that in the comments, but I will post the link to their website on this video. You're on YouTube, we'll put that in there. So, okay, here's Phil, he's got it. It's BHAMINS group.com. So there you go. Thanks, Phil. Appreciate the save. All right, guys. Go over there and check Corey and Jason out. Good people. and they can probably save you some money. Do you hold your properties in the name of a trust or LLC? Vincent, we use a trust for everything. Everything. There was back, gosh, it was, I don't know, it was several years ago now. There was a bunch of hubbub in the Carolinas. Some district attorney there had gotten the idea that because investors use land trusts for sub-2 deals, that somehow trusts were evil and all of these things. But we use a trust, and ever since I learned about trust, I used a trust for everything, whether I bought it for cash, bought it with a line of credit, or bought it subject to. Everything went in a trust. And you want to have an LLC be your beneficial interest, probably. Now that's going to depend on your structure, your setup, and how you do things. But my recommendation is a trust to hold title with an LLC as your beneficial interest. Okay. Tristan said, nowadays everyone's trying to sell to cover their equity, capture some profit. While not ideal, is it worth it to get seller financing on their equity plus some cash up front? If they will let you make their payments, can you sell for much more than your initial investment and get good cash flow? Tristan, there are still, most people think that everything out there is high priced with ton of equity, and you're right, more now than I've ever seen in 20 years that's the case. But if you pull certain lists, if you look for certain things, for example, we talked to a lady last week. They bought the house 8 months ago. They're trying to sell it for as close to what they owe as possible. In a lot of pockets in the United States, you can still buy reasonably priced real estate that doesn't have a ton of equity. But if they do have equity, what we like to do is give them something down and let them wait on the rest of it. And depending on their situation, a lot of people can do that. It's really going to depend on the deal. Can you still do it and get good cash flow? In some cases, not always. So you're just going to have to evaluate each deal individually. I've bought houses where I've made payments to people for their equity and still made cash flow. Sometimes you give up your cash flow for a year or 2 years or whatever the case may be, but you can still make money on your down payment when you sell with seller financing, depending on how much you give your seller down. It really just depends, and each deal is different. Sub2deals.com is not active. Well, that's because it's Sub2, the number 2 deals.com. Okay, Robert. So Sub2deals.com. Let me okay. The producer said she just checked it and it's okay. So this is the URL you want to go to. We're Sub the number 2 and have been for 15 years. So that's it. All righty. What we got? What is the cost to put a property in a land trust? Vincent, it is super expensive. It is actually $0. And that's one of the great things about a trust. You can form an LLC for every property that you got if you want to, or what have you. But a trust, once you have a trust document that's applicable to your state, and listen, I include one in my course, and you can use that if you want to. But my advice is to look at what people in your state are using, go to a trust attorney, use one that has been blessed by that attorney. And once you have the template, then all you got to do is change the name of the property and the players. Okay. And then it works just the same. And the great thing about a trust in almost all states is that it's not recorded at the courthouse. It stays in your file, inside your file cabinet. And the only time that it'll ever be under scrutiny is if you get sued. So you want to make sure it's right. But it doesn't cost you anything. Trusts are free. After that initial one that you pay somebody to put together for you, then you just duplicate it down the road. So that's another one of the benefits. Go get that ebook. It's 50 reasons. It's pretty detailed, and I think it'll help you out. So, all right, guys, I think we're going to wrap things up today. I appreciate all of you coming out and talking with us. about the most frequently asked questions on Subject 2. Hope this helped, and you got some questions answered that maybe you had before. Remember, if you're interested in Sub2 Max coaching, you can check us out at sub2dealscoach.com or at sub2max.com. It's a pretty awesome program, and we're super excited to have you come check us out and join us. So I think that's going to wrap things up today. We'll be here every Thursday. Next Thursday, we're actually, gosh, who are we going to have next? We're going to have Bill Walston on here talking about how to save money next year. If you've done your taxes or you're doing your taxes and things are looking pretty grim, join us next week, and we'll get him on here and answer some tax questions and things like that. Maybe it'll save you a little bit of money. So you guys get out there, talk to some sellers, buy some houses, and we'll see you next week.